I'm Michael Martinez, and you're about to listen to an AI-generated discussion of my article, Who was King Bladorthin in The Hobbit? I don't know if it's supposed to be pronounced Bladorthin or Bladorthin. Yeah, I chose Bladorthin. So, as far as I know, they're good for that.
You know that feeling when just one tiny detail in a story like catches your eye and you just can't shake it?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's kind of where we are today. We're going to dive headfirst into a really fascinating little puzzle. It's tucked away in The Hobbit,
Right.
the mystery of King Bladorthin. We're here to sort of unpack who this enigmatic king might have actually been.
Yeah, it's intriguing, isn't it? Because he's mentioned, what, once?
Just once.
And yet, King Bladorthin and those thrice-forged spears meant for his armies, but apparently never delivered. They spark so much curiosity.
They really do.
It makes you think about all those unseen corners of Middle-earth, you know? The stories that are hinted at, but, well, never fully told.
Exactly. And I think what makes it such a sticky question for Tolkien fans is just how little information there is. Like you said, one mention in The Hobbit, and then he just vanishes. He's not in The Lord of the Rings when they talk about Dale or Erebor's history.
Right, completely absent.
So that single line, it's really become this focal point for speculation. You see readers, scholars, everyone trying to piece together who he was.
And what's really interesting, I think, is when you look into the early drafts of The Hobbit.
Ah, yes.
Because in Tolkien's first versions, the wizard, the one we all know as Gandalf,
Yeah.
he was actually called Bladorthin.
No way. Okay, that adds a whole new layer.
It does. It totally reframes the question, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It makes you ask about the name itself. Where did it come from? Why reuse it?
Okay, let's unpack that connection then. The same name. First for Gandalf, basically, one of the main characters. And then it gets applied to this shadowy king figure later on. That feels significant.
It could be.
So the Middle-earth and J.R.R. Tolkien blog article we're looking at mentions John Rateliff.
Yes, in the History of the Hobbit.
Yeah.
A fantastic resource.
Right, and he argues pretty compellingly, it seems, that Bladorthin probably has Elvish roots.
That's his take, yeah. Specifically, Gnomish or Noldoran.
Gnomish or Noldoran? So tying it into Tolkien's language work from the early to mid-1930s?
Exactly. Rateliff points to certain, sound patterns and word structures that Tolkien was using in those early Elvish dialects, things that seem to sort of echo in the name Bladorthin.
Okay, that makes sense, grounding it in the linguistic work of the time.
Yes, and Rateliff really knows his stuff when it comes to Tolkien's evolving languages. But, and this is important, Tolkien himself never actually said what Bladorthin meant. He never gave us a definitive etymology.
Ah, right, so it's still interpretation.
It is a very strong evidence-based interpretation, especially for the wizard's original name, but interpretation nonetheless.
Which, brings up that Occam's razor idea, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, is it possible? The simplest answer is just Tolkien liked the sound of the name, and he just decided, okay, Gandalf needs a new name, but I'll hang on to Bladorthin for something else. Maybe for this king, without some deep hidden link.
That's certainly a possibility. You absolutely have to consider it. Tolkien did reuse things, names, themes, character ideas. They pop up again and again as his mythology developed.
Right.
And Rateliff actually makes another fascinating comparison here. He links the early Bladorthin, the wizard version, to other early wizard-like figures in Tolkien's writings, like Artaxerxes from Roverandom.
Oh, Roverandom, yeah. The little dog.
That's one. Artaxerxes is the wizard who enchants him. And then there's Tuvo from the Book of Lost Tales.
Tuvo, I'm less familiar with him.
He's an early, very powerful figure. A wizard involved in the Elves' Awakening even becomes their first king in some versions. These characters, like that first concept of Bladorthin, they sort of fit this archetype, this recurring idea of a mysterious, maybe wandering magician who has a big impact, an interloper almost.
So it's like Tolkien was playing with this wizard concept, trying different versions as his world grew, moving from these maybe more folkloric figures.
Exactly. Folkloric is a good word.
Yeah. Towards the more defined roles we see later, like Gandalf and Saruman in Middle-earth proper.
Precisely. And the article also brings up another key point. The setting of the early Hobbit drafts.
Oh, how does that fit in?
Well, initially, the geography was imagined as being much closer to Beleriand, the lands from the First Age stories in the Silmarillion.
Okay.
But Tolkien later revised that. He shifted the timeline, the geography, moved it further east, further away from those ancient Beleriand events.
Right. So the Lonely Mountain isn't sitting next door to Gondolin anymore, basically.
Metaphorically speaking, yes. It became part of a different age, a different region.
Okay, so if the setting changed, what does that imply for King Bladorthin, the one who ordered the spears?
It means we can't just automatically assume, say, a strong Elvish connection for the king, just because the wizard's name might have had one tied to that earlier Beleriand adjacent concept.
I see. The context shifted.
Exactly. The King Bladorthin who ordered the spears probably serves a different, maybe more local narrative purpose within the final geography and timeline of The Hobbit. His name might have different roots, or maybe no specific roots at all.
So the Elvish link seems strongest for the original wizard Bladorthin.
Plausible, yes.
But maybe less certain for the king who inherited the name. Which, like you said, opens up other possibilities. The article mentions a few other ideas beyond Elvish.
It does, yeah. It touches on the fact that Tolkien didn't only use his invented languages for names.
Right, you mentioned Artaxerxes. That sounds Persian.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Clearly Persian. And there's speculation about Tuvo maybe having Spanish or even Dravidian roots, though that's more uncertain.
Wow.
It just shows Tolkien had this incredible ear for language sounds, and his influences were really broad, not just Elvish.
So that adds complexity. He's pulling from real-world languages, too. What about the Anglo-Saxon ideas the article mentions?
Yeah, there are a couple of theories there. Intriguing, but maybe not as widely accepted. One idea combines blade, which could mean blade like a sword or maybe leaf-like part, with maybe orthin gas, possibly meaning people of Orth or something similar. Another thought connects blade, maybe meaning leaf, with eorth, meaning earth or ground or world.
Giving you meanings like blade of the world, or maybe leaf of the earth.
Something like that. Very evocative, right?
Yeah.
But again, speculative.
Definitely evocative. And there was one more possibility mentioned, Old Norse.
Yes, and given Tolkien's absolute love for Norse mythology, that's always worth considering.
True.
In Old Norse, blad can mean herbs or plants, things often linked with magic. Combine that with jord, meaning earth.
Ah, so maybe something like magical plants of the earth?
It's a possibility. It hints at a connection to the natural world, maybe magic. It's not definitive, but it fits with Tolkien's known interests.
Okay, so wow. We've got Elvish, maybe Persian, maybe Anglo-Saxon, maybe Old Norse. It really shows how much room there is for interpretation with these like smaller background elements in Middle-earth.
It really does.
But let's switch focus a bit to the spears themselves. Thrice-forged. What does that actually mean? It sounds impressive.
It does sound impressive.
Yeah.
And it almost certainly refers to the quality of the smithing.
Not like 3 spear points.
No, probably not. Think about reforging metal. Doing it multiple times, 3 times, in this case, was a way to purify the steel, hammer out impurities, make it stronger, better, master-level work.
Okay.
The article mentions James Baldwin's retelling of the Siegfried story.
Right, the Norse hero.
Yeah, where Siegfried has to reforge his father's sword, Balmung. And he does it 3 times to get it perfect, incredibly strong.
Ah, okay, so there's a mythological precedent for thrice-forged, meaning superior quality.
Exactly. It speaks to incredible craftsmanship.
Yeah.
And the article links this to smithcraft in Tolkien's world, especially dwarven smithcraft.
Which makes sense, given the spears were likely made by the dwarves of Erebor for this king.
Precisely. Remember Thorin saying how fathers wanted their sons to learn smith work from his people?
Yeah.
It shows the high regard, almost this mystical power associated with their craft. Baldwin even connects legendary smiths, like Mimir in Norse myth, to those ancient sort of dwarf-like beings, which might make you think of, say, Mim the Petty Dwarf in the Silmarillion.
Interesting connection. It's amazing how these little threads can potentially weave back into the bigger mythology.
It is, even in seemingly minor details. And that thrice-forged idea, it's not just Germanic, is it?
No, the article points out it also appears in Finnish folk songs.
Right, often with magical implications there too.
So it reinforces this idea that Tolkien is drawing from this whole pool of Norse, Germanic, maybe Finnish folklore, suggesting these spears weren't just well-made, they were possibly legendary, special.
Exactly. High status, maybe even enchanted item.
Which naturally makes you ask the big question. If they were so special, why were they never delivered?
And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Ah, yeah.
And unfortunately, the source material just doesn't tell us. We can guess, of course. Maybe Bladorthin's kingdom fell, maybe Smaug arrived before they could be shipped, maybe there was a trade dispute. Who knows?
Nothing concrete.
Nothing. And The article rightly avoids just making things up. It remains another part of the Bladorthin mystery.
So after digging into all this, the wizard connection, the name origins, the spears, what's the main takeaway about King Bladorthin? Who was he?
Well, ultimately, as the article concludes, we still don't really know. The origin of his name is officially unknown.
Right.
The connection to the earlier wizard Bladorthin, with those possible Elvish roots, it's a strong theory. Very plausible for the wizard's name. But the possibility that Tolkien just, liked the name and recycled it for a minor king later on, that's still entirely possible too. Maybe even probable for the king.
So the mystery endures. And I guess the hope is always that maybe some future discovery, some linguistic note, maybe an unpublished scrap of writing, might shed more light.
That's the dream for Tolkien scholars, isn't it? But yeah, for now, he's just one of Middle-earth's many fascinating loose ends, enigmas.
A tantalizing glimpse of a bigger world.
Precisely. The full story of King Bladorthin. It might just stay forever out of reach.
Okay, so let's quickly recap then. We've looked at Bladorthin maybe being linked to the wizard who became Gandalf.
Yep.
We've explored all sorts of potential linguistic roots, Elvish, Anglo-Saxon, Old Norse, maybe others. And we examine what thrice-forged likely means for the spear's master craftsmanship, drawing on mythological ideas.
Right. Quality, maybe even magic.
But King Bladorthin himself, still basically a shadow, a brief mention, but one that sparks the imagination.
And despite all the scholarly digging and these really intriguing possibilities, his actual identity, why those spears weren't delivered, we just don't have the final answers from the text we have.
It really makes you wonder, though, doesn't it? I mean, why did Tolkien leave that detail in The Hobbit, just that one mention?
It's a good question.
What does that unanswered question, the whole mystery of Bladorthin and his spears, what does it add to the feel of Middle-earth? Even in a book like The Hobbit.
Depth, maybe?
Yeah, maybe it shows the power of these little unsolved mysteries. They make the world feel bigger, older, like there are countless stories happening just off the page, hints of a history that we only get glimpses of. Makes you think.